Hi, I'm Lila Urogdy, and I'm studying biopsychology, cognition, and neuroscience at the University of Michigan. Welcome to my podcast, Neurobites, where I break down new and significant research about psychology, neuroscience, and mental health topics in order to make research more accessible to the general public. Just a disclaimer before I start. While I do my best to keep all of my content factually correct, I'm learning with you, so there may be errors along the way or differences in the ways results are interpreted. If I say something you disagree with or believe to be false, I encourage you to reach out and initiate a discussion with me. Let's get into the episode. Today I'm going to be discussing a controversial question. Do vaccines cause autism? In this episode, I'll explain why the correlation became such a popular argument, explain the facts, and debunk common myths and misconceptions. Sources used and resources for you to look at will be posted in the show notes. Before I get started, I want you to know that this episode, just like every episode I create, is based on facts, not politics or opinions. Therefore, the information in this episode is solely grounded in science and is not affiliated with any particular party, nor is it provided in the attempt to sway political opinions. In 1998, Andrew Wakefield published a paper in The Lancet, a prominent British medical journal, describing 12 patients with developmental regression and gastrointestinal issues. Wakefield claimed that this was evidence of a link between the onset of behavioral autistic symptoms and receiving the MMR vaccine. In his paper, Wakefield concluded that the onset of autistic behavioral symptoms was correlated with the MMR vaccine in 8 of the 12 children because in these individuals, the onset of behavioral symptoms was reported to occur shortly after they received the MMR vaccine. Here, I just want to point out that even if Wakefield's study wasn't severely flawed, correlation does not by any means prove causation. So after this paper was published, there was widespread panic about the connection between the MMR vaccine and autism, and this panic and controversy has seeped into politics, which has created uncertainty and fear about vaccines still to this day, even after Wakefield has been discredited. For reasons that I'll discuss in a minute, Wakefield's paper was retracted, his medical license was revoked, and no studies to this date provide credible evidence of a link between the MMR vaccine, or any vaccine for that matter, and the onset of autism. Before I dive into the study, let's talk about some background facts first. So first of all, what is the MMR vaccine? The MMR vaccine, short for measles, mumps, and rubella, is commonly given to young children to protect against these diseases. Measles is a highly contagious viral infection, even more contagious than viruses like COVID-19 or the flu, and there's no established treatment after one is affected. While most people won't die from the disease, it can cause serious complications such as pneumonia or encephalitis, which is inflammation of the brain. Measles may be fatal in some individuals, especially in young children or those who are immunocompromised. Mumps is a virus that creates relatively mild symptoms in most people, but in rare cases it can cause meningitis, hearing loss, or a reduction in fertility, and in extremely rare cases it may cause death. Rubella is also a virus, and it resembles measles but with relatively milder symptoms. However, it can be dangerous when an individual is pregnant, leading to the death of a fetus or serious birth defects. The MMR vaccine creates long-lasting immunity against all of these viruses and has proven to be highly safe and effective. It has vastly reduced the cases of all 3 of these diseases worldwide, and especially in the United States. However, with the misinformation being spread about these vaccines, more cases are beginning to show up in areas where vaccination rates have decreased. So, given this information, why did Wakefield conduct a study to look for a link between autism and the MMR vaccine? First, I just want to make it clear that Wakefield wasn't trying to create a case against all vaccines. He advocated for single vaccines, but he claimed he'd found evidence of the possible dangers of the triple MMR vaccine. So, what was wrong with the study? Well, before the study, lawyers representing parents of children with autism were planning a lawsuit against the vaccine manufacturers, and these lawyers had paid Wakefield hundreds of thousands of dollars. This major conflict of interest was not mentioned in the paper. Additionally, much of the data was manipulated to fit the results that Wakefield wanted to see. So after investigators looked into the study, it was discovered that some of the children that were said to have autism in the paper actually did not. Additionally, the paper said that all the children in the study were deemed to be developmentally normal before the MMR vaccines, and that developmental delays only started after receiving the MMR vaccine. However, this is not true. 5 of the children in the study had begun experiencing developmental delays well before receiving the MMR vaccine. Additionally, some of the children who did begin having behavioral symptoms multiple months after the vaccine were said to have developed these symptoms only days after receiving the vaccine. So Wakefield manipulated these dates in order to make it seem like these behavioral autistic symptoms started occurring right after the MMR vaccine, when in reality they actually started occurring multiple months after receiving the MMR vaccine. A couple other things about this study, just in general, were that the sample size was very small, only 12, and it was also not randomly selected. The children in the study were selected because they had already shown signs of developmental delay. Additionally, there was no control group, which would have helped determine whether these symptoms would have occurred, regardless of whether the children had received the vaccine. So all of these major flaws in the paper discredit the results found in the study, but most importantly, the results Wakefield claimed to have found have never been replicated. Reproducibility is a crucial part of science because when results are replicated again and again, it indicates that the conclusions are valid and outcomes are reliable and consistent in the population of interest. So again, these findings that Wakefield claimed to have had have never been found in any other study, any other credible study. So now that I've broken down the case and debunked common vaccine myths, let's return to the original question. Do vaccines cause autism? Well, in science, it's important to know that nothing can be proven with absolute certainty. We can't be 100% certain about any claim or hypothesis. However, as of now, after multiple rigorous studies investigating the link, there is no evidence that correlates any vaccine to autism. So the answer is no, vaccines do not cause autism. But why do people still insist that vaccines do cause autism? Well, first of all, there is a lot of misinformation and lack of scientific understanding. And that is one reason why I wanted to create this podcast episode, just to kind of debunk some common myths and spread some true information and try to stop the spread of misinformation and misinterpretation of fraudulent data. There's also a lot of stigma around autism in our society, and many people actually don't understand what autism is, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about what autism actually is and what it is not. So let's get into what actually autism is. So I'm going to give you a basic understanding of what autism is, but first I just want to mention that autism is complex and its characteristics vary greatly and manifest differently in every individual. Additionally, I do recognize that every individual with autism prefers different phrasing when it comes to their diagnosis, such as person with autism or autistic person. I'll try to be sensitive with the phrasing that I use, but I obviously can't accommodate everyone's preferences. With that being said, here's a general explanation of what autism is. Autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, is a complex developmental disorder described in the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Manual for Mental Health Professionals. Individuals with ASD fall on a wide spectrum, and each individual struggles with different aspects of the disorder to varying degrees. Many individuals with autism have difficulties with social interactions, emotional regulation, and sensitivities to sensory stimuli. They can also have very rigid black and white thinking and have difficulties with flexibility and change. Additionally, some but not all individuals with autism are nonverbal, meaning that they do not communicate through spoken language or their speaking is very limited. However, these individuals are still able to understand language and express themselves in other ways. There is a lot more to autism, but that is kind of a basic overview of what it is and some of the symptoms. Now I'm going to talk about some of the myths. One of the major myths is that having autism means that you're dumb, and this is not true. Some individuals with autism have average intelligence. Some individuals have below average intelligence, and some individuals have above average intelligence, just like the general population. Just because you have autism it doesn't mean you're dumb. Additionally, having autism does not mean that you're violent. Some individuals may be more prone to lashing out, and they may have trouble managing emotions, but this doesn't mean that everyone with autism is violent. Additionally, having autism doesn't mean that you lack empathy. Many people with autism are extremely empathetic, but they just lack the skills to effectively communicate with others about emotions. And this may make them come across as cold or uncaring, even if they do care and they are very empathetic. And then the last really common myth is that having autism means that you have these superpowers, like insane math skills or photographic memory. And while some individuals with autism do have useful skills that are well above average, these are often embellished on TV and in the media, and most individuals with autism don't have these so-called superpowers like this. So overall, I hope that from this episode you have a better understanding of how the theory of the link between vaccines and autism came to be, and why there's no evidence to support the theory, and also what autism actually is. If you'd like to learn more about any of these topics, let me know, and I'll make another episode going more into depth about whatever you're interested in. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast and expanding your knowledge of psychology, neuroscience, and mental health topics. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to learn alongside you. If you have the chance, please rate and review this podcast, share with a friend, and let me know what you want to learn about next.